You are listening to the cycling podcast at the Vuelta España in association with Rapha, celebrating the sport and producing the finest cycling clothing since 2004.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I am once again with Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
Hello, Lionel. So this is day 2 of the Vuelta España. Short daily dispatches from us here in the UK. We'll be heading out to Spain later on in the race. We do have Daniel Friebe there. We'll hear from him in a moment. But before we do, let's have the tale of the etapa, please, Lionel.
Okay, Richard. Yeah, as you say, stage 2, still up in Galicia in the northwest of the country. 160 kilometres to Baiona. And it was a fairly run-of-the-mill stage, wasn't it? Early breakaway was provoked by Cesare Benedetti of Bora and Laurent Pichon of Française des Jeux, and they were joined shortly afterwards by Brian Nallo of Direct Energy, and their lead never really troubled the peloton. It was only 4.5 minutes at its maximum point, and it was slowly reeled in. As they got into the final 50 kilometres, it was down to around 1.5 minutes, and that was when Philippe Gilbert of BMC Racing bridged across. He got across to them with around about 38 kilometres to go, and that made a reasonably handy quartet at the front. But they were caught with 15 to go. Shortly after that, Tiago Macado had a little dig for Katusha. His attack didn't last very long, and then we were set up for the sprint, which we expected. There were a couple of crashes in the final stages. Sergei Lagutian of Katusha went down quite heavily with 2.5 kilometres to go, and there was another crash right before the line where Direct Energy's Ryan Anderson, a Canadian rider, hit the ground as well. Etixx-QuickStep got the sprint spot on, and Gianni Meersman of Belgium won it ahead of Michael Schwarzman of Bora Argon. Michal Kwiatkowski of Team Sky finished 4th, and so he takes over the red jersey from his teammate Peter Kennaugh. There we go.
Very good. Yes. A beautiful part of the world, isn't it? I think we might have got it wrong, a bit wrong here in terms of when we go out of them. Sure. The other parts of Spain are equally nice, but it really is stunning.
It is, yeah. I mean, that whole northern stretch right from that corner all the way across the Basque Country to Bilbao, where I'll be joining the race, is lovely. I think you'll be lucky, Rich. You'll get a nice part. Certainly food-wise, there'll be plenty to keep you sustained for your week.
Yeah, and we've had a request to do a kilometre zero on Spanish ham, after various sort of food and drink related kilometre zeros at the Tour and the Giro. And we're not doing a daily kilometre zero. We will do featurey style pieces in the regular show once we're out in Spain. Difficult to do while we're here in London, but we will do little features, and we'll try and do a ham one, I think, at one point. I might leave that to you, Lionel. That seems like your specialist subject.
Do I have to stop at ham?
A bit of a ham fan.
I certainly am a ham fan. I'm just a whole array of tapas. I'm very happy to take care of that one, Rich, yeah.
Well, you'll have pinchos in the Basque Country, of course, which are a real treat, so you'll enjoy that. Now, because you can have at least twice as many. Let's hear, before we talk about today's stage, let's hear from Daniel, who sent us a dispatch really talking a little bit about the opening day and, his thoughts in the days leading up to the Vuelta about who's in form, who's relaxed, who isn't. Here is Daniel Friebe.
Hola, hello chaps. It's nice to be joining you from Spain. Of course, you'll be joining me in a couple of days. I can't even remember who's going first, Richard or Lionel. Lionel, Richie, you kind of blur into one after a while. Anyway, it's been an interesting first 36 hours or so here in Spain, or 48 hours. Interesting build up to the race. I did a bit of mopping up of interviews on Thursday, Friday, caught up with a few riders. And in light of sort of what I saw and heard on Thursday, it was interesting just to watch Team Sky win the team time trial. They don't think were going particularly well when they were practicing on the course on Friday, the team time trial. There were a few race voices at the time. I don't think Peter Kennaugh was particularly pleased with the way they were organised, and yesterday they certainly got it together. Kennaugh ending up in the red jersey, but it's been also intriguing to just observe Chris Froome's body language, demeanour over the last 48 hours. He seems a lot more relaxed certainly than he was at the Tour de France, and even more relaxed than he was at the Dauphiné in June, when of course he still had all of his big objectives to come. I think I get the feeling anyway that Froome is here to win, but he feels that anything he achieves now this season would be a bit of a bonus. Alberto Contador is in a very different position. I caught up with him on Friday, and I think he was trying to be quite diplomatic and magnanimous about the strength of his team, but I don't think he was particularly optimistic about how well his team is going to go and how much they're going to support him, particularly in the mountains. Having said that, I thought they would go much better in the team time trial with guys like Boaro and Benati, both good rouleurs and very experienced riders. I thought they would do a decent time, and that wasn't the case. A bit of a blow for Contador to lose almost a minute in the opening time trial, and it's already looking as though it's going to be an uphill struggle for him. Elsewhere, Hugh Carthy, going to be interesting to see how he goes. He lost an awful lot of time. He lost over 4 minutes in the team time trial. He got popped, had problems. So his GC objectives are pretty much compromised already, but it's early days for him. He's riding his first Grand Tour, of course. So, plenty of opportunities in the mountains, plenty of hilly stages that he'll be able to sink his teeth into. He, on Thursday, when I saw him, or on Friday, was just about, I think, the skinniest bike rider I've ever seen. Almost alarmingly thin. I hope that doesn't penalise him too much. I did wonder at one point in the team time trial whether he'd stop for a McDonald's or a Subway or something of that order, and probably not. Anyway, guys, looking forward to seeing you, looking forward to catching up with you every day here at the Vuelta. I'll be keeping my eyes open, my ears open, trying to pick up as much interesting tidbits or as many interesting tidbits, as much gossip as possible to throw your way. So that's about it, and catch up with you again tomorrow. Adios.
Eurosport, the home of cycling.
Thank you very much to Eurosport for sponsoring the cycling podcast. And it's been a busy old day on Eurosport. Obviously, they're showing the Vuelta live every day with Carlton Kirby and Magnus Backstead today. And Sean Kelly will be replacing Magnus in the coming days. But first thing this morning, I was up watching the Women's World Tour race in Vårgårda, the road race 2 days after a team time trial. That was on Eurosport this morning, and it was won by the Swedish rider Emilia Fallon. So that was a very good win for her, obviously a home win, and it was dominated by a big break, which also had the British champion Hannah Barnes in it. But Hannah sort of got her line a bit wrong coming into the final corner and finished 6th in the end. Roxanne Knetterman and Danny King almost got on, but finished just behind that leading group. So that was a good race. And then we had the Vuelta and then the Cyclassics in Hamburg, which
we did, yes, indeed.
Lionel?
Well, I was just going to say the women's race in Sweden was fantastic. I thought the
beautiful
course,
as well.
The scenery, the course with all the gravel sections. Yeah, it was a real sort of imaginative one, and it looked stunning, and it was aggressive at the end. And that group that got clear contained, a lot of powerful riders. So it was an impressive finish by Farlin, and a big one for the Swedes. Obviously, home victory for them. But you mentioned the Hamburg Cyclassics there, Rich, and that was won by Caleb Ewan. But it was notable for Nacer Bouhanni getting disqualified again for an irregular move right close to the line, where he veered to his right and forced Ewan across the road a bit. I mean, it was clearly an irregular move, but it was perhaps a case of Bouhanni's reputation preceding him a bit. But it did strike me as strange that Nacer Bouhanni isn't riding here at the Vuelta.
It is a bit odd. I mean, he obviously had a bad hand injury sustained in a fight on the eve of the Tour de France, on the eve of the French National Championships, which kept him out of the Tour. And I thought that, and we'll find out exactly what's going on, but I thought that was the injury that was keeping out the Vuelta as well, because Cofidis are have a big presence at the Vuelta as a sponsor, and they ride Orbea bikes, which the Basque bike manufacturer. That's a big deal for Orbea and for one of Spain's biggest bike companies. And Bouhanni is obviously the talisman of the Cofidis team, and a guy who could be winning stages there, could have won today. Now, there aren't many sprint stages. I think there are about 5 sprint stages, and 3 of them are in the final week. So it's a long way to go before you going to have some chances for stage wins, perhaps. But certainly today was a chance. And for all that he was disqualified, Bouhanni, he's clearly going well and back in full health. And if you look down the finishing order in Hamburg, Caleb Ewan, John Degenkolb, Giacomo Nizzolo, Danny Van Poppel, Alexander Christoph, Dylan Groenewegen, Andre Greipel. All the top sprinters really are there, apart from Peter Sagan, who's been slogging around Rio on a mountain bike, not too successfully today.
Oh, well, that wasn't his fault, was it? I mean, a puncture after he pulled himself as last man off the grid, pulled himself all the way up to the front, and then suffered a puncture. Very unfortunate timing for him.
Certainly not his fault.
No.
2 punctures, I think,
was
in the
it
end.
indeed?
But,
right, yeah. But it's interesting, though, you list the sprinters there at the Hamburg Cyclassics, and then you look at the top 10 at the Vuelta, and clearly it's a lot of unfamiliar names to people. But then some sprinters that you might have expected to do a little bit better. I'm thinking of people who are just outside the top 10. Jens Kukalera of Orica Bike Exchange was 11th. Jose Joaquin Rojas of Movistar was 12th, and even Enrico Battaglan of Lotto NL Jumbo, who's a handy finisher, was 17th. So it could be that little run in and the climb that was near the finish caused made it not such a sort of drag strip finish anyway.
Rojas up to second overall. It's quite interesting the classification. The first 10 are all on the same time, despite the race having started with a team time trial, a mix of Team Sky and Movistar. But Michal Kwiatkowski took over the lead from Peter Kennaugh, and it is a measure of how few really top class sprinters there are at the Vuelta that he was 4th on the stage, because he's a very good rider, a very good finisher, but not a sprinter, not a bunch sprinter.
No, certainly not. And I mean, it's probably a case that the riders look at there's so many mountaintop finishes. It's not exactly a sort of a gilded invitation to the sprinters here from the Vuelta organisers. This race is going to be really hard. Although they're not particularly long stages, there's an awful lot of climbing and an awful lot of those summit finishes. So understandable that there aren't too many sprinters here. And I suppose looking ahead to tomorrow, it's another one where you wouldn't expect any sprinters to have any chance anyway. I think there's a little third category climb very close to the finish. They go up to the top of it and then it plateaus out a bit.
One for Philippe Gilbert, perhaps. He was active today, as you said. He bridged across to that break, and Daniel asked him afterwards whether he was looking on the Vuelta as preparation for the Worlds. He kind of said no, that he's riding the Vuelta for its own sake. But given that the Worlds this year is we expect it to be a sprinter's race, it's kind of surprising there aren't more riders riding the Vuelta for preparation for the Worlds. More sprinters riding the Vuelta for the Worlds. Perhaps more of them will be, and some of them certainly we know will be at the Tour of Britain, which runs in the final week of at the same time as the final week of the Vuelta. So there aren't many riders riding the Vuelta who you would say are picks or favourites or contenders for the World Championships, which is, since the Vuelta moved to this slot in the calendar, that's very, very unusual.
It is, and it was its big selling point for a long time, wasn't it? That the Vuelta was the perfect preparation for the World Championships. It should be borne in mind that the Worlds are a little bit later in the year than they have been in most recent years. I think the road race is the first weekend in October. I think, is it October the 9th actually? So it could even be the second Sunday in October. Not entirely sure of the dates, but it's a little bit later than it has been. So there's quite a, it's not a case of coming straight out of the Vuelta and then having a little bit of a taper and then hitting the Worlds. There's basically 3.5 weeks gap between one and the other. So it's maybe not the ideal preparation, and we'll see. The Tour of Britain has really sort of usurped it a bit. I think, is it the last 3 years certainly that the world champion has come out of the Tour of Britain to claim the rainbow jersey. I'd have to check that, but certainly.
Well, not last year. Peter Sagan, certainly don't remember him riding the Tour of Britain.
True. It was 3 years before that, wasn't it?
In fact, and Lionel, just looking it up, you're right that the Worlds are very late this year. They're the 9th to the 16th of October. So it's deep into October that the road race will be on that final day of the championships on the 16th, which is very late indeed, and that might be one reason why the Vuelta field seems to have fewer riders who are going to be targeting the World Championships. Anything else catch your eye today? Daniel mentioned Hugh Carthy, who he spoke to before the Vuelta, and riding his first Grand Tour. Much is expected of him in the mountains. We don't expect to see much of him in these flat stages, but he had a bit of a nightmare in the team time trial. I think lost quite a lot of time. And I noticed he was last man. He was in the Steve Cummings position in the bunch today towards the end. That might not have anything to do with his form at all. It might just be where he wants to ride, and there's no reason for him not to be there. But I wonder what kind of form he's in. We'll find out when the road starts going up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that this is part of a plan, not to stress out too much in the early days, not to. Obviously, you don't want to get dropped and lose, several minutes in the team time trial. But, it's not a disaster, particularly if he's going to want a little bit of freedom when it comes to the climbing stages. If he's right up there overall, even though he's not necessarily a big name for the likes of Froome, Quintana, Valverde and so on to worry about, they would still have noticed that 9th place finish in the Tour of Catalonia. They'd know of his danger and of his skill in the mountains. So, it's not going to hurt him to have lost sort of a handful of minutes before they get to the climbing stages. It might actually work in his favour.
The Cycling Podcast in association with Rapha.
Well, anything else catch your eye today, Lionel, or will we wrap things up and return tomorrow?
Let's return tomorrow. I mean, it's been a nice gentle start. The peloton had a sort of a siesta kind of day, didn't they, today? They were quite a bit down on the time schedule, I think. It's a long way to Madrid. So let's take it easy.
It's quite relaxed, isn't it? One or two riders tweeting about how late the starts are at the Vuelta, and the stages tend to be quite short, and today certainly wasn't a searing pace. It was quite a bit behind schedule, so that bodes well, I think.
Well, I'm led to believe that we won't have any trouble getting dinner. The restaurants will all be staying open late enough for us if the race is behind schedule. Absolutely,
no worries on that front at all. And I managed not to make any faux pas tonight. I didn't say anything like funny golf or anything like that as I did last night. That was good.
I know. Well, it's some.
Easily done. It
is easily done. You shouldn't be too hard on yourself, Rich. I know you've
been watching too much sport the last couple of weeks. That's what it is. My mind's all mixed up with different sports.
It's been wall to wall sport, hasn't it? And very late nights watching. The
Quite
Olympics.
nice, though, isn't it? Because the Vuelta, and the Vuelta I think the Vuelta will benefit actually from a sort of post Olympics hangover, because Olympics has really filled people's lives for a couple of weeks, and there'll be a sense of emptiness, I think, once the Olympics are over, and the Vuelta is perfectly timed to just fill that gap.
Yeah, and I think the interest will certainly ramp up once the climbing starts, and we see just how the great thing about the Vuelta, and I suppose the Giro as well, is that you're never 100% sure who the form riders are going to be. You can take a good guess at it. You can see a few early clues, but it's not until they start putting pressure on each other that you really see. Whereas at the Tour de France, it's all a bit kind of like everybody's, everybody is at a high level, and so there's fewer kind of wild cards. There's people you expect to go well who do less well, but there's few people who shoot out of nowhere to mix things up. Although having said that, Adam Yates did exactly that in the Tour de France this summer.
Yeah, and the other intriguing aspect of the Vuelta always is motivation is more of a factor, I think, than at the Giro and the Tour. When team leaders go to the Giro and the Tour, it's because they are there to perform. Whereas for some of them at the Vuelta, it's maybe their second Grand Tour of the year, and the motivation is perhaps more questionable and more varied in terms of those riders. So that has another slightly intriguing. Adds a sort of intriguing dimension to things, and we'll see how things play out over the next few weeks.
No question about our motivation, though, Rich, is there? So
Well, No, I think we're easing ourselves in as well, just sort of dipping our toes in at the moment, but we'll be fully immersed by the end of this first week. We're going to meet up in London tomorrow, Lionel. We're going to watch the stage at the Rapha Cafe, and then we're going to talk about it. Thanks very much to Rapha. That was a nice little plug there, wasn't it, for them for sponsoring the cycling podcast. I should just quickly mention a couple of things coming out this week, actually. We're going to be releasing a chat with Joe Dombrowski at the Rapha Cafe in Spitalfields. It was actually held on the night of the Brexit vote, so there are a few references to Brexit in our chat, but it was very interesting. Joe is riding the Vuelta, of course, his second Grand Tour of the year. So that will be coming out possibly Monday, maybe Tuesday, certainly this week. And then later in the week, also a chat with Bradley Wiggins, which I had in the other Rapha store last week. So those things will be coming out in addition to these nightly shows about the Vuelta. Anyway, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Vamos de